Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me. My name is Hound, and you are currently on Westfox Studios. As you can see, Westfox is not here today. He is currently managing his media empire at the moment, so he has asked me to step in and fill in the gap for the YouTube algorithm. So I hope that this will work, and I hope you folks enjoy what we're going to be discussing. And what we will be discussing today will be, is it acceptable to take a life? Cue bumper. All right. An interesting subject. Yes, I agree. It may cause a little bit of discomfort or some thoughts and feelings that you may or may not enjoy, but hopefully I can give you an idea or an introspective look into what I consider the necessity for taking the life of evil people. Now, to set some groundwork for this, media is a tough field to compete with. To kind of give you the idea of how my mind works and what I'm thinking, and to be honest, typically I like to script this stuff. Typically I'd like to have an easier structured format. However, as I started to write about this stuff, as I started to structure this stuff, I realized that I didn't want to make a dissertation paper. I didn't want this to sound like some kind of thesis that I had to give before, a doctoral board or something like that. And I wanted this to be more passionate, wanted this to come from the heart. I didn't want this to feel sterile. I didn't want this to be very at arm's length. I wanted this to be very personal, because the idea of defending people, protecting people, and sacrificing our desires and wants at times for the good of protecting people, that's something that I hold in high value. And that's why I wanted to jump off on this, and because I just finished the show Trigun to Westfox's suggestion to kind of enter into the field of anime. I did enjoy the show for the most part, but this is probably one of the issues that I had the most. But before we get into that, let me again lay the groundwork, as I'd previously mentioned. Media affects people. What you consume, what you take in on the eye, does make minor changes in the way you perceive the world, the way you think about situations, and eventually the way you've decided to make choices for your moral fabric, and even maybe cultural, certainly spiritual fabric. Now you may say to yourself, there's things that just kind of come intuitively, and it's true, but eventually we have to make choices, particularly when we're confronted with the opposite of something. And so in media today, there tends to be this strict dichotomy. There's either gratuitous violence, and in Trigun, there's an obscene amount of gratuitous violence. Women, children, the elderly, and of course, young people, or I could say fighting age individuals, men, are wiped out without any regard for human life in this show by what we consider evil or bad or destructive people. The other flip side of that dichotomy is you have the one person, the protagonist for the television series, who has the way they present it. I don't want to put my own sarcastic or twist or bent on it. The way they've structured it in the show and how they try to provide is that the character has such a profound value for life and a profound belief that ending any life is not his right and not the right of anybody to take someone's life. That's the way that they've built this character. And because of that, the situations and scenarios that they find themselves in during the show often lead to people getting injured, people being killed by bad guys, but in the very, very end, when the good guy, Vash the Stampede, in this instance in the show, defeats the bad guys, He never takes anybody's life. And more often than not, what we would consider, or at least I should say, what I would consider true justice is not met out. Now, of course, no one believes, even those like me who are, I would consider myself, are warriors, are protectors. If someone put my wife's life in jeopardy, they would be putting their own life in my hands, because I would do anything and everything to protect my wife. And for me, taking a life to protect an innocent life is completely acceptable. However, in this show, we see that that is one of the, some would say, a righteous character, particular. Others would say a weakness. I would say that he's a weakness. And I think it's not in juxtaposition to those who wantonly murder, of course. But his character is put into juxtaposition of another character. His name is Nicholas D. Wolfwood, I believe. I kept calling him Wolford, but I guess that's Wolfwood. And his character, although you find out was raised to be an assassin, was raised to murder people, has the understanding that protecting people and saving people's lives is a positive. And if that means killing people who are evil, killing people who are destructive, killing people who have murdered in cold blood to save people, then it's a justified morality. In fact, it is a moral decision to make, because in this world that Trigun exists, and even in our current world, there are evil people, and there always will be evil people. The question is, how do we deal with them? And how do we deal with them in the heat of the moment? Now, of course, we have a judicial system, and if people are arrested and captured and they go through a process with which to be convicted, that is one thing. However, that doesn't exist in this world. For the most part, justice is met out by the victim or the person who ends up either protecting the victims, or sometimes the victims themselves are able to protect themselves, and they turn it from victim into defender, and they end up being the warrior to defend and to end up eliminating the problem. However, for this primary character of Vash, he does not take a life throughout the entire show, even though other people are brutally massacred around him. Now, people would argue that, he's holding to his convictions. There is a very powerful and pretty rough scene where one of the characters Vash is fighting first attacks Vash, but finds that he's unable to deal with him, because Vash is actually engaging in a tactic that many people would say were very, very wise. He's trying to draw the enemy out towards him, away from the city, so that he can fight. However, the enemy character recognizes this, sees this, and then decides to start destroying and murdering hundreds of people, because he doesn't have any care for life. He has complete disregard for life. Vash's response, of course, is to attack him, but in the heat of the moment where defending the life of innocent people would be called into question, and he would need to take this other life to defend them, he chooses not to. And he does this on numerous occasions. Many, many people die. Many, many people suffer. Many people lose their lives because he is unwilling to end people's lives who are a clear and present danger to those around them. It's not until the third to last episode where this character is forced to kill someone. Now, in the scene, it's actually very powerful, because the person he has to kill is willfully submitting themselves to be executed, forcing Vash's hand, because he has other people captured. He can control people with his mind. I know it's an odd concept. And of course, we're talking anime here, but the general decision eventually comes down to, here you have a bad guy who is presenting himself as to be executed, but also choosing to still hurt innocent people because he wants to force Vash to kill him. Now, his psychology, of course, is not worthwhile talking about in this kind of brief episode or discussion. But what he ends up doing is forcing Vash to choose, are you going to kill me, or are you going to let me control people that can kill people that you care about, that you value? In this instance, it was Meryl Streep and Millie Thompson. So eventually, against all his desires, he ends up taking this life. Vash ends up killing, the bad guy's name was Legato. What frustrates me about this situation is that after he does it, it breaks him as a person. It completely destroys him. He basically gives up and finds no value in his existence, in what he's done, and for temporary, it cripples him for the next episode of what he wants to do and what he needs to do when he has to face off against his brother, which was also a obnoxious ending because he doesn't end up killing his brother, because of course he's able to defeat him without killing him, even though his brother is the one who started all the evil and crazy people to start killing off the human population on this planet. But then you even find out at the very end of the show that he actually murdered the majority of the human population while they were in space before they could land on this planet. He intentionally sends all their ships to go into the atmosphere and be destroyed. The man is a genocidal monster, and yet his brother decides, you know what, I can save him. I have a choice not to take a life. When it comes down to it, I kind of find that mindset repugnant. And because other people's lives then hold no value, there is a place and a position for retribution. There is a place for justice to be met out. And when you start creating these odd dichotomies where your choices are, if you either like wanton murder, so if you kill somebody, you are in the category of wanton murder and just you hate all life, or you find yourself in the position where you refuse to take a life even though you're in the position to protect and defend, because you have some sense that if I kill someone, then I instantly become a bad guy. So the only other option is victim. This character, of course, has the skill set not to become a victim, and therein lies the rub. In reality, you can't do that. There is no person on the planet who can create the skills necessary to avoid every single violent situation, to avoid every single confrontation in such a way that no one would be injured by inaction or by a pseudo action. Because in reality, when confronted with a murderer or a very dangerous person who is ambushing you, you have to meet force with force. You have to be smart. You have to be clever. You cannot script write yourself because of some type of concept or pseudo moral imperative that you believe all life is crucially important, no matter how someone engages in that life. And it is a problem. And that's why I think the character that comes into juxtaposition with Vash the Stampede is Nicholas D. Wolfwood. Because he runs an orphanage. He is what I would call a warrior poet, a protector, a defender. Having been trained to be a murderer, he removes himself from that life. He protects children. He has a little orphanage where he runs and keeps them alive. And he has a dedication to make sure that people who are innocent and people who are in need of protection are protected. And if that means he has to take the life of someone who is willing to infringe on those other people, then he is more than happy to do it. And his character is extremely amusing and definitely speaks to me as a human being, as a defender, because it is an important imperative. It is a moral imperative that those who are strong, those who are capable, those who have trained themselves both mentally, physically, and with a skill set, use those things to defend those who maybe haven't had the opportunity because they are feeble, or because they're young, or just because they never had the idea. And it also is an imperative to defend those who are ignorant. Even if they would turn around and call you a barbarian, even if they would turn around and say that you are a bad, evil person, they don't have a right to be defended. But you, as a person, if you have the mindset of defense, should always have a desire to protect, even if it's not something that someone desires, even if it's not something that someone would give you accolades for, and maybe quite the opposite, but it's important. And I think that is epitomized in Trigun when just thinking about it makes me smile. But finding out what happens to his character in the end was just frustrating. Absolutely frustrating. But in the scene, you start to realize that he and so Millie Thompson is a female kind of a partner with Vash the Stampede. It's funny, they're insurance gals. They're supposed to be keeping an eye on him. It's pretty amusing. It's very, very funny. Well, Wolfwood ends up kind of having feelings for this gal, Millie Thompson. And as they start to flirt and it's very subtle and it's very sweet and very kind, they start to grow in this relationship. Wolford has to make a very important choice where one of the people who's trying to murder Vash ends up getting the drop on Vash, but he looks like a child. And Vash is trying to psychologically maneuver his way and kind of find a way to disarm the situation without eliminating the threat. Well, Wolfwood comes up, sees what's going on, and shoots the kid because the kid's a murderer. The kid was going to kill Vash. He was going to kill all the other kids. He was going to kill Millie, and he was going to kill Meryl, and it was going to be a problem. Vash gets upset and frustrated by that decision. And, of course, that frustrates Wolfwood. A later episode, or it may have been at the end of that same episode, he discusses his actions to kill this kid with Millie. And the scene is absolutely touching, and it's a wonderful scene because while being with Vash, is conflicted on whether he actually does need to kill or not, because he can't see how there can be all these situations where you can always find a way out to avoid killing somebody. And he struggles with it. There is conscience in this man. He isn't a ruthless murderer. He isn't there just to see bloodshed. He makes those choices only when he has to defend those people that he cares about. And he actually breaks down in the scene and finds encouragement in this gal that he started to have affections for. And like I said, as a husband, as someone who loves protecting people and always espouses defense for people, for men and women, that warrior mindset isn't a murderer mindset. It's not a mercenary mindset. It's a protection mindset. It's a defending mindset. But even then, those people have to bear those scars. I'm not saying that if you ever found yourself in a situation where you would have to defend somebody, if you ever found yourself in the situation where you'd have to take a life to save someone else, I'm not saying there wouldn't be scars attached to that. Killing someone is by no means a pleasant thing that people have to do, but there are times where it's necessary when people who are predators are trying to victimize. And sometimes they chew off more than they can handle, and someone is there to protect those people. Or sometimes the prospective victim is protected themselves. And it's excellent. It's excellent because in most media, you will not find that third dichotomy. It's either a wanton murder, people who don't care about life, or you kind of get this overly overt and painfully unrealistic version of a pacifist or someone who is never willing to actually take a life. But even then, and we saw in the show that same person eventually had to. They had no choice. There was no way to work it around. Although they then argued with themselves and engaged in self-destruction about, I could have, if I just taken more time, I could have found a way out. I could have figured a way out. And eventually he does recognize, okay, I can forgive myself and continue on, but he never really learns his lesson. On the other hand, Wolfwood, he ends up being murdered and killed because he tried to take Vash's advice in that there's always another way to solve a solution than killing the problem. And he ends up losing his life because of it, in a situation that this character would never have died in, because they always would have eliminated a threat that was trying to kill them or kill their friends. And in the very end, he ends up dying, and the scene is tragic because he didn't die defending his friends. He didn't die protecting loved ones or even himself. He dies because he gave up on what the true moral imperative is, in that eliminating a life that's trying to kill you, eliminating a person who wants to destroy you, is not an immorality, but a righteous necessity in a world where there are evil people who will always do evil things. And so I just wanted to bring that up. Like I said, this was not originally this was more of a thesis. I was going to go point by point, and then I realized that that's not very, in certain circumstances that would be perfectly fine, but I think this was more of an issue of wanting to express on a more passionate, heartfelt level that people are important, that life does have value. There's no doubt. And for people who think like I do, and who love people like I do, and work to strengthen ourselves so we can continue to protect people, so that we can protect people who are going to be victimized, so that we can eliminate predators, it's important to remember that you can do the exact same thing, that you can have a mindset to protect yourself. And there seems to be a constant drum that if you are not a person who just wants to kill people, then you have to be on the other side, which is a victim, which is cannot protect yourself, which is, oh no, taking a life is never okay. And that's not true. Protecting yourself, protecting your loved ones, protecting the people around you, and getting the skills to do that are crucially important. And you should never be conflicted with yourself on whether taking the life of an evil person is okay. And that's what I wanted to bring to the forefront, because it's something that's common, and it's something that I think needs to be dealt with and criticized when it's displayed that way. Well, I will end that right there. I hope you enjoyed the conversation, folks. I hope that it gave you something to consider and think about, something that might have been interesting, something that might have been affirmative in your own mind, or maybe you completely disagree with me and want nothing more than to yell and scream and say, get this guy off the video. Well, I'm not going anywhere. So thank you, folks. Thank you for your time. And thank you, Westfox, for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion. And we will see you folks, I think a few days from now. We are going to do a 2-part of Picard episode 4 and episode 5. So please do stay tuned, and let's bump out.